Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 10 of HSCI 6262. Our focus today is community impact on scientific approval and also key policy initiatives that FDA focus on faster approval of devices, drugs, biologics, etc. First of all, welcome back. I hope we hope you had a good spring break, and we look forward to finishing up the semester in a good way with all of you. The overview for today is that we're focusing on scientific approval for this week. So we're looking at two things. We're looking at how the community provides input into the scientific approval process, and they do. You may not realize just how much community members, advocacy groups, and so on provide input into the approval of new devices, drugs, biologics, etc. But they really do, particularly in some areas. For example, you saw this strongly with the recent concern that Avastin was causing harm to patients, and you saw how many people were providing public input on the benefits of the drug. In the long run, the public didn't win that one, at least on the side of supporting marketing of the drug. But you still saw how much people provide input, and you see the same thing with the HIV/AIDS community. They've been really active for years and impacting the way drugs are approved for HIV/AIDS. And we're also going to talk briefly about policy factors, and hopefully the reading is useful for all of you in this area. Scan those websites, take a look at the publications we provided to you because there's lots of great information in there, and we don't have time to cover it in this mini lecture. So, with regards to scientific approval, this is obviously a necessary step for those of you who are going to be creating some new product. All right. For those of you who are creating a new way of providing care, delivering care, maybe organizing clinicians in some way, or perhaps getting patients to change their behavior in some way, you don't have to worry so much about at least the FDA stage of scientific approval, but you do need approval from your peers. So scientific approval starts with peer approval, and it starts with peer-reviewed literature. So any of you who are trying to create some new idea and promote it are going to have to justify your idea to your peers. You're going to need to have evidence, of course, to prove that it works. So that's really the first step in scientific approval is getting your peers to say, well, yes, this works, and we agree with the approach that's been used, and so on. The next step is FDA approval for those of you who are creating products. Others of you don't have to worry about that, of course. And we'll try to discuss some later in the course, some of the other factors that matter for interventions that have nothing to do with FDA, and there are plenty of those. All right, first, community input. So the community can provide input in at least two ways, and the biggest way is public comment. And really, in a democratic system, there are multiple opportunities for the public to comment. There are proposed rules that are created, so basically new regulations that the FDA generates, and people can actually provide comments on those new regulations. But people can also comment at other periods, and they can comment when something goes wrong, such as inappropriate marketing of a drug, or they've been somehow harmed by a drug and they want to report, side effects or harm. So really, at any stage in the approval process, and also after the device or drug has been approved, the public can comment in some way on it or the company's behavior or so on. With regard to proposed rules, they're advertised in the Federal Register. Because there are so many of these rules generated, the government really just needs one source to use. Often media will pick up on really the hot new regulations that are being generated, and they'll publicize them to the public also. But it's really up to the public to really go looking for this information. It's all transparent, it's available, but it's not going to be delivered to your doorstep. People have to go out and find information. Um, but the public can also participate in FDA advisory committees. And here I mean, the public as experts and non experts. So any of you could participate in an FDA advisory committee. And that includes those of you who are clinicians and non-clinicians. It's really not limited in any way. And there can also be consumer representatives. So perhaps some of the patients you serve, or some of the lay people you're going to be working with in some way, might be interested in serving on a committee like this, and they can. It's really a fairly open process. You do have to apply to become a member of the advisory committee, and if they have space and if you're appropriate for the committee, you can participate. These committees have received some. Sorry, these committees have been a bit controversial in some circumstances simply because some of the experts have ties to industry. It's really hard to get really good experts who have no ties at all to industry, because experts want to have those ties in order to translate their products into greater public benefit. But all the experts have to provide all their financial ties and fill out conflict of interest forms and so on, in order for us to try to at least get experts who are not conflicted, or as conflicted as little as possible. All right, policy factors that impact the scientific approval process. Well, there are tons of policy factors. Obviously, the FDA only exists because of policy. So the mere existence of the agency and its role in our society has to do with policy. And as you know, there are a number of politicians who say, the FDA is getting in the way, and we need to change the amount of regulations they have, and so on. They're slowing down innovation and that kind of thing. And this receives quite a bit of attention in the media. So you can really see, I think, the role of policy and also politics in impacting the scientific approval process. It's not a process that happens in a black box with only researchers or scientists in a room discussing what the new ideas are, what the literature looks like, and so on. This process is highly politicized. It's impacted by all kinds of factors. Obviously, FDA approval means money, right? So, because of all the money that comes from these products, members of Congress are concerned about what FDA is doing. So one way that policy impacts the scientific approval process is through the budget process. So FDA has been chronically underfunded. Here's a quick video you can look at where Margaret Hamburg, the FDA commissioner, is actually talking about the chronic underfunding and how it impacts what the FDA does. The FDA is constantly being asked to do more and more work on regulating products that impact the American public, but they're not receiving the funding to match that. There's also something called the Critical Path Initiative, which has received a lot of attention over the last almost a decade now, because it was really a new way for FDA to sort of focus on uh, where is there a need for better translation of scientific data into new products, and how do we actually speed up the process of getting these things out to people, increasing the speed at which we get uh, I hesitate to say cures, but drugs that can alleviate some of the symptoms of certain diseases out to the public. And luckily, there are reports on the progress of the Critical Path Initiative. This is very similar to the CTSA effort and the new reorganization of how CTSAs operate through the new center called NCATS at NIH. NCATS is really focused on trying to trying to work with industry and do some of the early research that industry needs in order to get the findings translated out to them, so that they can start thinking about doing later stage clinical trials. So having researchers who are funded by the government really take on some of the early risks that companies don't want to take on because they lose so much money on that. An example of some of the progress that has been made with the Critical Path Initiative are box warnings that have been added to reflect pharmacogenomic evidence. So this is really lab evidence, genomic lab evidence that has now been translated and put into drug warnings. All right, so we also provided you with the Driving Biomedical Innovation Report. Some of you may not realize just how much the FDA participates in the innovation process in our country. but they really do have a role in innovation and stimulating innovation. It's not so obvious, but the approval process is really focused on trying to make sure some of the best products get out to the public as fast as possible, but also we want to make sure those products are safe and effective. So it's tough to balance innovation and safety and effectiveness. Of course, on the manufacturer side, the safety and effectiveness side, barrier, it seems like it's slowing them down sometimes. But what it's really doing is making sure that some of the problems they face later on are less likely to occur. So often, if something's pushed through too quickly, or if data is fraudulent, then the company will later in the game they will feel the impact of the approval process not going as well as it should have. So if you have fraudulent data, at some point, whatever product you have is not going to work well. You're going to harm people, and then you're going to be sued later. So FDA is really trying to prevent those later problems, and especially harm to the public, by providing a good approval process that encourages innovation, but also encourages safety and effectiveness. All right, an example of some of the work that the FDA is doing to improve innovation is really trying to be more welcoming to small businesses. They've also been focusing a lot on personalized medicine. As many of you know, this is one of the bigger pushes in biomedical research these days. It's the personalized medicine more. We're headed towards more genomic medicine, and that trend is moving quickly, and the FDA wants to be a part of it. Another trend that's coming about is the use of mobile devices, and so the FDA recently put out a report last year indicating how they would regulate some medical apps. So, apps for smartphones, iPhones, or Droids, or something else, or other types of devices. The FDA just wanted industry to know how they're going to be regulating apps, and so they're trying to keep up with what's going on. They're trying to encourage innovation as much as possible. They sponsor conferences and some other events that focus on innovation. So the FDA is trying to play a role here, and policy impacts all of this. So it really does impact the scientific approval process in a number of ways. Okay, that's it for this week for me. I look forward to talking with all of you next week, and I look forward to your discussion comments. Thanks.